We're not treating him like a new MLK. I'm seeing people saying he was a literal saint. He should have a statue put up in Congress. Chris, am I supposed to just let that go and not say, we probably shouldn't have a statue in Congress for a man who says Islam is a religion being used to slit the throat of the West, that Muslims like me are conquerors? This is the kind of stuff he said.
The moment Mehdi Hasan went on Chris Cuomo's show, the entire narrative around Charlie Kirk's death started falling apart. And once the facts were said out loud, there was no putting it back together. Watch this carefully. Let's get into it together.
The data is clear. People on the left are much likelier to defend and celebrate political violence. This is not a both sides problem.
They're already under major investigation. A lot of the people that you would traditionally say are on the left.
They're
already under investigation.
The last message that Charlie sent me, we need to have an organized strategy to go after the left-wing organizations that are promoting violence in this country. It is a vast domestic terror movement. And with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. It will happen, and we will do it in Charlie's name.
3 quick points. 1, playing this to advantage is a mistake. 2, blaming a group for the act of an individual is a mistake and does nothing to encourage any different thinking. And 3rd, the statistics tell us a different story. We see violence from both sides. You can look it up for yourself. So the question is, what are we seeing in response to this? And what does it mean? Let's bring in Ken Cuccinelli, served as acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security in the first Trump administration, and Mehdi Hasan, founder and CEO of the media company Zeteo. And yes, Mehdi and I have been arguing on Twitter. I like Mehdi. I respect Mehdi. I don't care what happens on Twitter. He is always welcome to make his case. And anyone who thinks that I have any hostility towards him is making a mistake. Mehdi, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
All right. So let me start with you, Mehdi. How would you analyze what you're hearing in response to this murder from the left?
From the left? I mean, just listening to the clips you played from the Trump administration, we're in a very dark moment. It's a very McCarthyite moment right now. I've been listening to your show. You made a lot of good points. The biggest point I think you've glossed over is the crackdown on free speech, this targeting of people for their views. I thought Charlie Kirk was supposed to be a free speech martyr. Why are the right using his death to crack down on free speech and American rights and go after this amorphous left? J.D. Vance lied today on the Charlie Kirk show when he said the statistics are clear that this is a left-wing problem. It's the exact reverse, right? Exact reverse. You look at the ADL Center for Extremism, which looked at 444 people killed by extremists between 2013 and 2022, 75% of them by the right. You look at the University of Maryland study that was done for their terrorism center, which found that from 1948 to 2018, right-wing extremists more likely to carry out violence than left-wing extremists. You look at the head of the FBI, who Donald Trump appointed, Chris Wray, who said the #1 domestic terror threat in this country comes from religious and racially motivated extremists, specifically white supremacists. You can keep going. The National Institute for Justice found that the majority of incidents since 1990, violent terroristic acts were right-wing extremists. The single biggest day of political violence, Chris, in our lifetimes in this country was January 6th, 2021, when right-wing extremists attacked the Capitol, injured police officers. They were ideologically motivated. You and I agreed it was an insurrection at the time. So it's bizarre for Vance to go on TV or go online and say the exact opposite of what both the official statistics say and the think tanks say. All of our evidence tells us. I mean, there was a Democratic lawmaker, Chris, I don't know how many times we have to say this, who was murdered in her home with her husband in June by a Trump supporter. And Donald Trump today said, who? When he was asked about it, he said, who?
Mm-hmm. So, Mehdi, one quick thing. I do not think January 6th was an insurrection. I thought that it was all kinds of crimes.
You said it at the time, Chris.
I just don't.
You called it an insurrection at the time. You did. You did.
No,
I checked your Twitter before I came on
never
air.
thought.
Okay,
go ahead, show it to me.
Check it afterwards.
I never thought that they were trying to take over the government. That's what an insurrection is. But it doesn't matter. It was bad. But we're dealing with new bad stuff. But
it was political violence. We can agree, right, Chris? It was political violence.
100%. It was political violence, but this was a murder for what somebody was saying. Well,
they were trying to murder Mike Pence, Chris. They were trying to murder Mike Pence.
Well, but they didn't. Those are just words. And if you killed somebody for saying it, you would have had a problem.
Hold on, because he survived? Because Mike Pence survived an assassination attempt, it's fine?
Well, it's no assassination attempt. They never had hands on him. They didn't do anything to him. But my point is speech versus actions, okay? But Ken, speech versus
killing of a
actions.
Democratic lawmaker this summer, murder.
Yeah, Hortman was killed. Two people were killed. Yes,
that was murder.
Go ahead, Ken.
And Charlie Kirk's killing was murder. Speech is not violence, which is something we hear a lot in the rhetoric about free speech. Violence is violence, and one of the
Can give a clear example that completely blows up the idea that Chris Cuomo and Ken Cuccinelli are right when they claim speech can never be violent and that only physical acts count as violence. Charles Manson spent the rest of his life in prison because his followers murdered people after he instructed them to do so. He never physically carried out those killings himself. And yet, he was held legally and morally responsible. That alone proves Cuomo and Cuccinelli are wrong. People have been convicted of murder without ever pulling a trigger or wielding a knife themselves, so the claim that speech is never violent simply does not hold up, especially in the context Mehdi Hasan is describing. The next thing I'll say is this. Mehdi Hasan is, without question, one of the best debaters on television, online, or anywhere else right now. I genuinely don't understand why anyone voluntarily chooses to go up against him. And he's absolutely correct when he points out that J.D. Vance flat out lied when he went on Charlie Kirk's show and claimed this isn't a both sides issue, pretending political violence only exists on one side. We all know Donald Trump lies as easily as he breathes, and these lies aren't accidental, they're deliberate. They're about pushing an agenda aimed at tightening control over the country in every possible way. We have never seen a force as destructive as Donald Trump, someone so openly interested in reshaping the entire country in his own image. That's why they're lying, not by mistake, but to consolidate power. And you have to ask the uncomfortable question, is the endgame martial law? Is the goal to justify shutting down elections, midterms, even presidential elections? Honestly, that idea no longer sounds far-fetched. And when Mehdi Hasan brings up January 6th, when he reminds people about lawmakers being murdered in Minnesota, the MAGA right immediately looks away. They refuse to engage with any of it. They gloss right over these facts as if they never happened at all, as if none of it exists.
To reject the speech as violence, which is one of the excuses I'm hearing an awful lot about excusing Charlie Kirk's murder, is because then you devalue the significance on a moral basis of actual violence. And it's important, an opportunity for unity that I think still exists is for everyone to reject violence for political ends. Chris, you'll remember I said this over and over and over back in 2020 when I was the deputy secretary and cities across the country were burning. And then elected officials were very accepting, frankly, and excusing. Some of them were helping in the form of bailing people out, violent protesters. You even noted that early on in that process that these things don't always have to be peaceful. And I disagree. They do have to be peaceful. That's something we should all, left and right, be able to agree on. It's still there to be a unifying point, the rejection of violence, which is something Charlie Kirk lived and died for. People who actually watched him interact with people who disagreed with him, you and I are very passionate. Mehdi's obviously very passionate. Charlie was incredibly level in how he communicated with people. He was firm, but he never got angry. He didn't call people names. He respected them. He told them he respected them. And frankly, it's a model for all of us, left and right, to emulate, not the violence.
Well, I don't know about emulating everything about it, but that's not the point. Two quick things, and then back to you, Mehdi. The first thing is that I never said that protests aren't supposed to be peaceful. I know what the First Amendment is. What I said was at the time when the protests first started, there was so much pushback against the speech. What are they saying? They're saying things at cops. They're saying the ugliest things, the worst things. And I said, what do you think they're going to do? Sing slave hymns and then go home? You know, nobody ever said it's going to be peaceful out there. They're going to say a lot of things that are going to bother you. That's the price of our freedom and our democracy in this country. That was my point. Now, Mehdi, the idea of, is it time, place, and manner that, hey, I condemn this. This is unacceptable, what happened to Charlie Kirk. But he said a lot of things that were fill in the blank of extremist and abhorrent things. Why put those together right now?
So, Chris, I'm glad you asked me that question. It's a perfect timing because with respect to Ken made a very good point about rejecting violence. I agree with Ken. The problem, of course, is that Ken's former boss, Donald Trump, pardoned a bunch of politically violent people earlier this year. He's even dangled pardons in front of the kidnappers.
So did Joe Biden.
the attempted, I'm not here to defend Joe Biden, but Donald Trump pardoned a bunch of political extremists who attacked the Capitol. And he's also, Chris, dangled pardons in front of the people who wanted to kidnap and maybe kill Gretchen Whitmer, like horrible political extremists. He's talked about pardoning them as well. So that's a real problem. And we need the president, as you said in your introduction, to really lead on this and use this killing of his friend to say, you know what, all of us tone it down. This is a president who's called his enemies scum, vermin, animals. You know, Chris, better than me what he's called his political enemies, including you. So that's what we need from the president. We're not getting it from the president. We're getting more kind of talk of pardons. The other issue which you asked about Charlie Kirk, look, I differ from you on this, Chris, and this is what we argued on Twitter. I think public figures are not private figures. I think public figures, when they die, of course we should be respectful to their families. I've said time and again that it breaks my heart to think about what his children are going through, what his widow is going through. It's horrific what happened to him. I can't even watch that video. I refuse to watch that video of what happened to him. But he's a public figure. I'm a public figure. Chris, you're a public figure. When we die, people are going to look at what we said and say, well, I agreed with him on this, I agreed with him on that. And the problem is Ken and the right are trying to almost deify him. What Ken just said is not true, that Charlie never called for violence, that Charlie was level. Charlie called for me to be deported from America because he didn't like a monologue I did on COVID. He called for Joe Biden to be executed by death penalty. We can go down the list. I know you don't want to hear. Let's not make this a Charlie Kirk rhetoric thing. But I don't know what else to say. When I hear Ken saying things that I think are untrue, then I have to respond. You know me, Chris, it's in my nature. I have to respond and say, well, that's not true. Here are the facts. Just last week, the day before he died, the day before he was brutally murdered, he said that Islam is the sword the left is using to slit the throat of America. I don't think that's rhetoric that people should be emulating. I find that deeply offensive rhetoric. Obviously, it doesn't justify killing him. Nothing justifies killing him. But please don't tell me that he was a level-headed person who never insulted or abused anyone. That's just not true. He asked for people to post bail on the guy who attacked Paul Pelosi in his home, a violent extremist, Trump supporter, election denier, who attacked Paul Pelosi in his home, is now in prison for attempted murder. Charlie called for bail to be posted for him by an American hero. So that's the kind of rhetoric I don't think we need or emulate.
Mehdi, what is the difference? What is the difference between telling the truth and rationalizing the murder? That's why I talk about time, place, and manner. That when you say, look, this is unacceptable, but he said a lot of terrible things, it sounds like you're not as upset that he was murdered because he said those things.
With respect, Chris, that's not what I said. I said his murder is inexcusable. I've said that consistently, as have we all. But I was responding to Ken saying that Charlie was X, Y, Z. If Ken and the right, and Ken, I'm not picking on you, but the right in general, were not treating him like a new MLK. I'm seeing people saying he was a literal saint. He should have a statue put up in Congress. Chris, am I supposed to just let that go and not say, we probably shouldn't have a statue in Congress for a man who says Islam is a religion being used to slit the throat of the West, that Muslims like me are conquerors? This is the kind of stuff he said. Am I supposed to not respond to that political rhetoric?
Well, I think it's about how you respond to it and when you respond to it. The guy was just murdered. I mean, there's a reason why when people die, if you go to the wake, you don't stare down at the box, and say the guy was kind of a bum too. And that's why your interview with Omar bothered a lot of people.
If I may.
This whole idea tied to what Chris Cuomo said deserves to be unpacked carefully. First, there's this too soon argument. But Donald Trump clearly didn't think it was too soon. He immediately went on the offensive, blaming the left outright and claiming they were responsible for Charlie Kirk's death, even though, days later, we still have no confirmed motive from the killer. SE, no. Oh, apparently, it wasn't too soon for the right wing to politicize this tragedy and weaponize Charlie Kirk's death for their own agenda. And then there's Chris Cuomo saying to Mehdi Hasan, "You don't seem upset that he's dead." That framing is deeply flawed. Do people have to perform grief beyond acknowledging that it's tragic a man died and left behind a wife and children? Mehdi Hasan didn't know Charlie Kirk personally. In fact, Charlie Kirk openly called for Mehdi Hasan to be deported from the country. Oh, what exactly is Mehdi supposed to say? Is he expected to come out and pretend he admired or loved someone who publicly targeted him? And for the broader public, I have to ask, how many of the people flooding social media with praise and emotional tributes even knew who Charlie Kirk was before he died? I'd argue most Americans had never heard of him until this moment. So yes, we can say it's sad, it's tragic, and no one deserves to be murdered. All of that can be true at the same time. But can we also be honest and say we didn't agree with what he said or stood for? Because, as Mehdi Hasan pointed out, what we're seeing now is an attempt to turn Charlie Kirk into a saint, to float the idea of statues, and to mythologize him in ways that simply don't match reality. He wasn't a war hero. He didn't rush into a burning building to save lives. He was a podcaster who spent his days posting inflammatory and incendiary rhetoric online. And the fact that MAGA and the right have to elevate this figure Tells you everything you need to know about the moral bankruptcy of that movement. This is the person they're holding up as a role model. This is the be more like Charlie example they're pushing. A man who openly suggested Joe Biden should be imprisoned or even executed for supposed crimes against the country. That's who they're celebrating. So I want to hear from you. What do you think about this debate between Mehdi Hasan and Ken on Chris Cuomo's show? Is it really too soon to criticize the things Charlie Kirk said, especially when the right is already out for blood against the left? Or is this exactly the moment when we should be honest about the kinds of figures MAGA chooses to elevate? Because if Charlie Kirk represents the best they have to offer, then we're in a very dark place. I'm reminded of a few years ago arguing with a MAGA friend of mine after the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. It wasn't quite at this level of myth-making, but even then, members of Congress were talking about giving him a job, treating him like some kind of hero. And I remember saying, you can't find anyone better than that. There isn't a right-wing kid out there who saved someone from drowning or helped a choking child, someone you could genuinely point to as a positive example. But that's MAGA in a nutshell right now. And there just aren't many heroes on that side, at least in my opinion. So let me know what you think about what Mehdi Hasan had to say and what Chris Cuomo had to say. Make sure to like and subscribe.